Hello, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
I love you guys already. You individuals, already. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining us for today's second panel on gun violence, children, and mental health. My name is Dr. William Etta Simmons, and I am a psychologist, humanitarian, and owner of Integrative Psych and Consulting Services. Again, today's event is hosted as a joint effort between Child Guidance Resource Center's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council and our Government Relations Committee. Child Guidance Resource Centers delivers evidence-informed behavioral health services and community-wide wellness programs to children and families throughout the 5-county Philadelphia region. With gun violence traumatizing so many children, families, and in many cases, communities, Child Guidance Resource Centers felt a need to host this event. Today, we bring you our esteemed panelists who will share their views on the topic and offer ways that we can work together for solutions. Thank you. Our second panel today includes elected officials from around Philadelphia. So before we begin, I'd like you to go down the line and please introduce yourself and let us know who you are. Thank you.
Hello, I'm happy to start. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. My name's Talise Masawi, and I am Chief of Staff for our City Council member, Nicholas O'Rourke, and happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Joe Hohenstein. I'm the state representative for House District 177, which here in Philadelphia is essentially Fishtown up to Tacony, and also parts of Kensington and Wissinoming and Frankfurt, which is where I'm originally from.
Hi, I'm State Senator Anthony Hardy Williams, 8th Senatorial District, which is part of Philadelphia, Southwest, and 9 boroughs in Delaware County.
State Rep Regina Young. Welcome to the 185th District. This is my district. And of course, we're always great in 8th. This is his district as well. But I also represent parts of Southwest Philly, South Philly, and Delaware County, which includes Tenneco Township and Colwyn.
Thanks for having me in your district. My name is State Representative Dorisha Parker of the 198th District, which is parts of East and West Oak Lane, Alameda, Nicetown, and Logan. And I also represent the 14th, the 39th, and the 35th Police District. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Now for our next question, any or all of you can answer. Please just use the mic or share and answer any of these questions, all right? So the first one, data has shown that Philadelphia has experienced the biggest drop in gun violence among major U.S. cities so far in 2024. What do you think works or has worked to reduce gun violence? Whether that be specific initiatives, pieces of legislation, so forth and so on. What has worked?
Okay, since you made me go first. So, by the way, this is the 8th, and the other part is I appreciate you inviting me because we share the office. I'm rarely right next door. There's a few points that are kind of obvious, hopefully, that we were the highest in the country. So for our precipitous drop, that's not really bragging points because I keep hearing people brag about that. The reality is that because we dropped, we're going to be the biggest drop because we're the highest. There are some policy things that we did do. So we've invested in gun intervention programs, violence intervention programs from the state and the city. State, about $30 million this year, and it's been the last 2 cycles. We actually had a convening. We did a juvenile justice task force in the Senate and the House to study those database-driven conversations. I won't go into all that because you'll probably ask questions about that at some point in time. But we've actually taken aggressive steps to do that. The other part is young people always make decisions at a certain point in time. You could see it when drugs were very prevalent. They made decisions, and this generation is now making decisions as well. Not that we've abated it, changed everybody's hearts, but there are more young people who are involved in this activity who are now deciding not to be involved in it. And part of that is the work. The other part is families. And the other part is like organizations like this are all important.
Sure, I'll add, and I'll just speak from a different lens, and that would be to add to what the senator said. I will also add that community members are now awakening and they're engaging a lot more with each other, although there are some changes that happen on a governmental level, and there should be policies, should be in place, dollars should follow the policies. However, it's really boiling down to people power, and I think when we engage on a humanitarian level and activate and awaken the minds of the people to let everyone know that they too are a part of the solution as much as the problem, and so we have to make some conscious decisions and equip the people to be a part of the solution. So I do think community activity has rose to a different level, and I think with all of the governmental systems, the organizational systems, community school-based systems, everybody is attempting to get on the same page. I think that is also impacting the numbers.
More visible of an intergovernmental partnership from all branches of government, and that literally has been spilling down in many neighborhoods. My constituents challenged me. I was fighting for the longest time. I recently just became a co-block captain. And when I tell y'all it's exciting, I'm loving it. I didn't realize they did all these things in the neighborhood because sometimes I'm Harrisburg. So I'm included in some of the weekly walks in the neighborhood. They're doing it in a group capacity, and they've expanded it. I see the interaction that the little knuckleheads that I used to think were really troublesome really just wanted attention from the adults, really just wanted to talk to the adults. So literally now they see me, they're like, oh, what's up, Rep? You need me to clean your yard? Yes. Hey, Rep, can you take me to the store? Yeah. You got some money for dinner? Yeah. Like, and I don't mind that, but I feel that it's just being intentional and just being present, because social media is killing everybody. It really is the devil in so many ways, and that's really what's happening with the spill out in a lot of these streets. But I feel that people are tired of it and are stepping up more. So thank you.
I want to highlight a program that I think Councilmember O'Rourke is really excited about in the city that started under the previous administration. I know there's been some scaling up of it, but it's the Group Violence Intervention Program that's gotten some city and state funding. The purpose of that program is to highly target communities and neighborhoods and individuals who are, at most risk. I hate using the term high risk, but the idea is that folks in neighborhoods where there might be more networks of violence, where there is more influence of violence and impact, are getting more wraparound services. And they are getting targeted interventions. They are part of group support networks. That's a program, evidence-based. We saw between August 2020 to May of 2022, the 300 or so participants who were part of that group violence intervention program here in Philadelphia, there was a nearly 40% decrease in weekly shootings for the participants of that program. And we know that the city of Philadelphia loves a pilot program, right? We love a pilot program, but the kind of stuff we need to be doing is identifying, we know that worked well, how are we scaling it up? How are we making that sustainable? How are we bringing that to our kids? That's the kind of stuff that Councilmember O'Rourke is really excited about funding and thinking about in this next budget cycle.
I don't mind starting by saying, let's continue the work. If we're starting a particular platform and trajectory that is starting to show that we're reducing the numbers, let's continue on that path.
On the state level, the thing I was talking about with somebody just a little bit earlier is the preemption clause. So Philadelphia has already passed really solid gun control measures for the city of Philadelphia, but our colleagues in Harrisburg have said, no, you cannot do that because of this thing called the preemption clause. And they were just bragging about it again this past week because the city of Harrisburg tried to do the same. And they just lost, the city of Harrisburg lost that case as well because of this concept that for the entire state of Pennsylvania, especially around issues of taxation and guns and a few other issues, you are governed by what the state law and the state regulations call for. And one of the things that a lot of folks in Philly don't always recognize is just how difficult it is to get Philadelphia recognized for its unique contributions. We're the economic driver of the state, but also for these unique challenges that we have in education, in crime and violence, and the need to make sure that we get to say what is the most important thing to be able to do in controlling our, and effectively that we have the agency to be able to determine our own path. And that's is really, I think, one of the primary things. And there's a very specific issue with preemption, and then there's just a culture in Harrisburg, and it goes beyond party lines. It breaks down mostly on party lines, but goes beyond party lines that basically treats Philadelphia as if it's a drag on the rest of the state, when exactly the opposite is true.
I'd say a couple things. One, there's two parts. There's law, and then there's culture. The law part is kind of obvious, and it's a national conversation, which is beginning to happen. You're not going to remove all guns in America, but there's certain types of guns which are kind of obvious. Assault weapons, which was an assault weapons ban, the moment that got removed, the escalation of level of shootings across the country. School shootings, that's when white America became introduced to the violence in urban communities. And now we have partners in rural Pennsylvania, Republicans and Democrats nationally, who are facing the reality that we have to do something about these assault weapons. We will not be reduced to the city or a state. It'll probably be a national conversation which will occur. And we need to push that forward in this coming election cycle, frankly. The second part, though, is cultural. And, when you grow up in a part of Pennsylvania where a rifle is a part of your hunting pattern in your family, for those of us who see it differently, we're demonizing their culture, and I don't think that works at all. I do think, though, that we need to make sure our children are introduced to principles and concepts of how you resolve differences without the level of violence which occurs. Now, that is easier said than done, because that's sort of broken down by every community group teaching how you do that. And it's not the panacea I've heard people talk about. We don't talk in scientific terms. But grandma talking to the grandchild that she's raising, that's where the delivery becomes more real and practical. And so I think we need to spend a lot more time supporting those, strengthening families so that we can have practical, honest conversations about that. It was interesting you mentioned to one. We forget our history. Philadelphia was the center of homicides that had more gang-related deaths than any place in the country. We were number one before the Crips and the Bloods. Crisis intervention, we were number one. We went to 0 in 2 years because they interrupted cultural habits within communities. And that's what we have to have here in a policy way, but more importantly, in a practical way so we can apply it.
Things don't exist. And what I mean is the fact that Senator was talking about gangs. Gangs still exist. There is the Zoo Gang from California that recruits individuals from everybody's district in middle school. So you got individuals that are 10 and 11 years of age, some as low as 7, 8, learning about the culture, learning about what's going on and recruiting them, doing little things by just giving them candy and things and getting them into a culture. So gangs still exist. There's still, we need to still talk about that. There was a unit in the police department that was strictly responsible for gang intervention, going after those gangs. We got to make sure there is funding for that. And then also we got to have real conversation as adults. There is a bill, hopefully, if we get more colleagues in the House and the Senate, that I have, it's called Joint Parental Liability for Minors' Actions Committed with a Firearm. And the reason why I say that is if your child is coming into your house, not speaking to you, going straight up in this room, closing your door, and then an incident happened and everybody acts like they don't know, you know what's going on. And sometimes people don't know what's going on with their kids. It's time for parents and adults or guardians to stop being best friend with your children and their homies. And you need to know everybody your child is with. If you're paying the cellular phone bill, you should be taking that damn phone on demand. You don't need to ask for permission to go into their room. It's their room. I have one constituent, he said he noticed a decline in his kids' behavior. So he was like, they just weren't reaching each other. So he said every time they went into a room, they shut the door and there was no interaction. So what he did the next day they came home, there were no doors in their room. There were no doors in for their kids' room. So I'm just saying, I just need parents to stop being their homies and get back to being parents and guardians and discipline and raising your kids, because you don't want it to come on all of our deaths in the matter of a law and a legislation and a bill. I don't want to have 7 of these bills out here that is telling what a parent should be doing to their child. I don't want to be in this situation, and I'll end with this. Until we change what's happening in Philadelphia with the crime, I'm a bonus mother. I have 3 boys. They're not allowed in Philadelphia. That's real rap. They're not coming up here because I see what's happening. I'm listening to the streets, and it's not the best of times for me until I know it's further down and we are really just speaking to each other, not at each other, but really having general conversation. Like, it's cool for me to say, dang, sister, you sharp, you killing those shoes. I can't wear them in Harrisburg because I twist my ankle. Bruh, I love your outfit. Like, just having general conversation and being friendly and decorum. I think a lot of it is still from the trauma that has happened in slavery that we still have not addressed, and it's internalized. But we got to get to that, and we got to get some help for each other, because we're killing each other verbally and intentionally, and we don't need to be doing that anymore. Thank you.
And I'll be brief, but I just want to name, kind of in addition to these culture pieces that we're talking, that gun violence is a symptom of poverty. And that without addressing poverty in Philadelphia, we will not be making really long-term impacts, long-term changes on rates of gun violence. And so that's something that we as a city need to be focusing on. Something that Councilmember O'Rourke says often is that he thinks it's the business of government to give people money, and that shouldn't be a radical thing to say. That if you don't have the money to survive and thrive in Philadelphia, we need to find a way to lift you out of poverty. And so he is a adamant supporter of guaranteed income programs. We have several, again, pilots happening in Philadelphia around these types of programs, but we also know that they work. I'm really excited by a program that's happening in Richmond, California, that is focused on youth. And it's not a guaranteed income program, but it basically gives kids stipends, small amounts of money for doing this mentorship program, for reaching life milestones, like getting their first job, or, acing a test, or learning a new life skill, like how to change a tire. They get financial incentives for participating in that. That program is pretty old, started in around 2010. That program saw a 50% decrease in homicide rates in Richmond, which was a city also plagued with gun violence in ways that Philadelphia is. And so addressing gun violence, to Councilmember O'Rourke, is also about addressing the deep challenges of disinvestment and poverty in Philadelphia. And without that, we will not be making significant inroads. And so we need to be putting our money where our mouth is and making sure that people have the resources they need to survive here. Because we know that when they don't have those resources, our kids are out on the streets, right? They don't have things to do. They don't have places to go. They don't have employment. It's not just our kids, it's our adults too, and it puts you in a really bad spot. Idle hands are the devil's workshop, as they say, and we often need to refocus ourselves on the issue of poverty in order to make inroads here.
I'm generations removed from some of the folks on this panel. So it's nice to say we want to do X, Y, and Z and give. The reality is we live in one of the poorest cities in America, and if you're depending upon half of your tax base, that's generous, to support revenue, you got to be honest with them. Property taxes are not going to increase. People are not, they'll say one thing, but they will react differently. So the reality is how you create something that's sustainable, you have to do it in the context of when everybody contributes. There's a perspective, and I'm saying this honestly and earnestly, because I came out of a family that wasn't poor, they were po, because they couldn't afford the R, right? And they did not particularly care for people taking care of them. They want to take care of themselves. Now, that may mean you invest in me initially, but I got a responsibility to go on from there. My father served in the military. He went to Penn State, and he went to Penn Law School, coming from that one generation of poverty. So how do we do it? One, we have to have people who are in those conditions participate. You can't continue to, I'm going to give you something and not require something in return. People got time. So if you're a person who's of a modest income and you're not working, then you need to be at the recreation center coaching a kid, which cuts our cost of hiring a coach. There are ways to do these programs, but we're not necessarily doing it in a partnership. We're doing it like handing down and bringing. We need to see each other as equals. The fact that your pocketbook is different doesn't mean that you as a human being are different.
So I was just going to add to that, and what I hear Senator Williams talk about is empowerment. We have to definitely continue to raise awareness about empowerment, because like my colleague Joe spoke to, our environment in Harrisburg looks a lot different than Philadelphia. And as we fight for the resources here in Philadelphia, there are 66 other counties that don't believe we need what we say we deserve. And so as we're fighting against those forces, it's important for us to empower the people that we want to equip and stabilize in these systems. But when you ask your question, the only thing I can think of was administration. Policies definitely are important, but when administrations change, usually people want to go in with their own agenda, oftentimes discrediting what has happened before and what has worked, and they want their own initial on it. And we have to get out of our own way of egos. And so I want to say, just from what I know of the Parker administration and how I've seen the movement, I believe she's doing a great job in just incorporating all the voices at the table, because it's not necessarily about ego as much as it's about the people. And so I appreciate the collaboration, and the more we have these type of dialogues to not only empower and uplift the voices of not only Philadelphians, but those of us who represent the Commonwealth, I think we can be more stabilized as a people.
Right. So when we're talking about, I listen to everybody is saying, and I try to behave. But when I hear a couple of things, it starts out initially to me as first the individuals will write an op-ed, then they'll have a rally, then you have a task force, then you have a commission, then you'll have a pilot, So the folks in the neighborhood are like, okay, so when are we actually going to get to the work that all these 7 layers have come to, and then my folks is still affected by what's happening. And then the individuals who are really initializing or getting a pilot started are not from the neighborhoods and the community that's truly are affected. And you have sometimes hired as consultants initializing the pilot, as I call it, poverty pimping a problem, but they are not solving it because they're not asking the individuals. So I said it in a way not to poo-poo anybody's with their layers of steps, but people want absolute solutions, but they want it real time, but not looking at how we got to this point and why we're in this area. My model that I've been reading recently has been the model from Maryland. Maryland right now is number 2 in education, and number 3 in wealth. That's my goal. Because I want Philadelphia no longer to talk about poverty. I want us to be prosperous, and I want us to be positive, and I want it to be productive. And the only way we can do that is we intentionally do it in a manner that folks in this room are going to be upset, because we got to talk about wealth building. We got to talk about real things that people don't know that can happen to them. Talk about real things. And a lot of times is when people are talking about a workforce right now, the workforce that happened with Senator Williams' era and my parents' era, they don't look the same. They really don't look the same. And when you have people who are trying to put these systems in place, they don't know how to do it. So I think what sometimes needs to happen is, I call it, the people in the community are saying what they really want, but they sometimes don't know who to go to. And when we bring it to them, we try to have these types of events, then they complain, and then they don't show up. So what I've been trying to do is when we get these information, I put it out to them. Now, what are you going to do in holding them accountable so we can get this stuff done? Because when you're looking at this tier on the table, we're the government from the state level. So our process is longer versus certain things that they can get implemented from the city level, because they can get the funds quicker than we are. So I feel like we are doing it in a way, but I think people want it speedier as a microwave. And that's why sometimes I point them and direct them to the city, because the funding will come a little bit faster than us from the state. But I got to be realistic with some people. The new hustle is nonprofit. The new hustle is grants. And if you're coming to us with a $2.5 million budget, but everybody on their salary, and you think the lunches and the ribbon cutting is a program, we got a major problem. And that's not a program. Lunches and ribbon cutting is not a program. That's not a program. Photo op is not a program. Actually seeing you doing some literacy and doing some financial learning, doing it from pre-K to 12, those are programs.
So I agree with everybody that this is an issue of money, but channeling a little bit of my Quaker past and this old poster that was up in my grade school that said, when the military has to hold a bake sale to build a bomber and the schools have all they need, then we know we're going to be in the right place. It's value. What are we putting value on, right? And this goes to some of what you had also mentioned around making sure that there's a level of income that everyone receives. I was talking yesterday with a young man who worked on one of my early campaigns, and just checking in with him and seeing where he was in his professional development. And one of the things he talked about is, if I'm going to get to where I need to be, this is my salary that I need to be at, and I got to go in and ask and demand that. And he's recognizing all of the different barriers that get in the way of him demanding that salary. That is basically what his value is. So when we devalue entire communities and entire groups of people and the work that they do and the type of work, like when we devalue education, when we devalue or make mental health hard to access, or we say to a particular community, well, for you to get access to to housing, these are all of the extra hoops you have to go through, right? You don't get the privilege of just stepping to the front of the line, and you have to then, and when you get to the end of the line, say, thank you, sir. No. You shouldn't be in this position of always coming hat in hand as an individual, as community, to say, please fund these programs at work. What we need to do is to make sure the access to the funding is there, and it's not recognized as a handout. It's recognized as something that will come back to help us. Use the studies that talk about early childhood education and the number of dollars that we're spending on that, and then how much that then saves us, because those kids have learned how to learn when they were 3, 4, 5 years old, and they're not stuck in the quote failing schools that some of my colleagues want to cite Philadelphia for. And why is that? Well, because we haven't recognized the value of all of those institutions in each of these communities.
That I took a page out of my colleague, who's also my roommate, Rep. Young does. She hosts grants and certain like a 1, 2, 3. So what I'm finding with a lot of these organizations is they don't have a back office. They're not 501c3. They've just been doing a lot of things from the muscle, and then get frustrated when they come to me and I say, we can't fund you if your house, I say, is not in order. So taking a page out of her book, what we've been doing is hosting those type of individuals. So when we have these forums for them, we literally bring them to the room to talk to the decision maker that shows them why your grant was rejected, what you were missing, where's your 1099s, where is your actual program. And what we have been finding is that individuals have figured out the game and literally know how to write the grant to get the money, but they never do the program. And that's literally what has happened. I call out the Inquirer. The Inquirer did a very disservice for calling out a lot of groups. And I noticed they were all black, and I didn't find that. That's why I'm not a subscriber today for other reasons. But I don't like the fact that they made it seem like that black organizations weren't doing the work. They are doing the work. And the way the system is pretty much set up is the fact that organizations put their money out front first, and then they literally are waiting for the government to reimburse them. But if you're not educated about this process, you get into it, and then it makes you look like the bad guy, that you're really doing something wrong, when you really don't understand how government works or how we are. We are not an ATM. We're really to help you enhance what you're currently doing and to make sure you replicate. So what I say to people all the time is, it helps when you're coming to any of the state reps, instead of 7 of y'all having the same damn program and asking all of us for $10,000, y'all can come as a coalition, and then it makes more sense. Have a coalition, then we could fund it in $100,000 or $50,000 or whenever else. That makes more sense, because you guys are competing for the same funds, and then you get upset because you're rejected, because you're doing the same thing every year and you're getting the same results. So I'm saying I'm glad this room is here, and we can walk away with why things are the way they are, and we're here for solutions. So I give you 60 seconds to vent, then let's talk about the solution. And every year you constantly come into Rep. Parker for a grant for the same thing, and you wondering why you haven't gotten funded.
Don't start doing what they do. We were fine. Our microphone was fine. one, we got to acknowledge we got a big problem with race. And the center of most of these things, whether people like it, and people get uncomfortable with me because, like, why do you always have to bring up race? Because it's always present. So when you talk about mental health, which is now a popular term that people talk about, not acknowledging the fact that we don't have enough mental health, enough therapists in this country to accommodate the issues, and we certainly don't have enough folks of color who are actually going into the profession. So the pipeline is critical. How you analyze issues, how you interpret the problems are affected by your cultural background and your ethnic background and where you grew, and your economics as well. And I'm saying that to say because I grew up in the 70s as a teenager. Dang, that was a long time ago. But anyway, as I mentioned to you, we were the number one city in the nation with gun violence. And despite what people thought, my father was a lawyer, my mom was a school teacher, he was an elected official, but we lived in a neighborhood. So I lived in a neighborhood, and I used to take public transportation to my middle school. In order to do that, I had to get on a bus, which was the Creek, 46, go up Baltimore Avenue, get off at 60th and Market, which was the Moon, get on the L, go across the city, Timberline, Zulu Nation, North Philadelphia, get off in Kensington, which was not the Kensington of the day, but it was white ethnics, chase you to school, try to learn, and then do that every day. The consequence is that there's a 67-year-old black man who sits here with a degree in economics from Franklin and Marshall, worked for large corporations in America, sits in the Senate of Pennsylvania. But if I walk into a restaurant, I sit with my back to the door. I don't sit with my back to the door. When I get out my car at night, I move at a certain pace. If people say a certain word or two to me, my reaction is to go across the Senate aisle and punch them in the damn mouth. All that is a part of the mental health component that we as a nation have not acknowledged, comes in part because we operate in different silos. How we look, therapy in and of itself ain't going to help you unless you have a therapist who can acknowledge that your challenges are a little bit different based upon you're a woman, that you're gay, you're black, or you're white, you're Irish, you're Polish. All those are components of therapy, and anybody who's in therapy will tell you honestly that's some of what we need to start talking about if we're going to talk about this mass approach to mental health, which we need to make. Like, they removed civics from our school. This is one of those components that was removed from our school. Because when teachers lived in our neighborhood, I had to walk past Mrs. Brown's house to get home, right? She knew me not just as a student that she checked out at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. She knew me as a child who lived in the neighborhood and knew what I was capable of or not capable of. So they had insight to me as a person. So frankly, it's number one on the list if you want to deal with the disrupting violence. It's number one on the list, understanding what a human being is going through, why they're going through it, what you can do about it to support them and help them. But we got to acknowledge some barriers. One, we don't have enough, and we certainly don't have enough people of color. Two, we got to acknowledge that there's this issue of cultural backgrounds which affects the quality of therapy that you're going to have. When you do this is why I'm old school. So when you do this, don't nobody hear y'all. I go to events all the time. Young people are like, he's so cool. I'm like, well, then clap, damn it.
Sometimes just let people know, including myself, like, it's hard work to maintain sanity each day. And I think people walk around with this mask and hopeful to get through the day without snapping. But the reality of it is those of us who live in these particular communities are traumatized like all the time, and so we have to figure out a way to combat that. And I'm going to venture out to say it's bigger than just the youth. It's just people in general. I think just people in particular communities, and I would say now, unfortunately, given this political climate across the nation, everybody's just traumatized. They just want solutions. They're sick of the noise and the chaos. So my response to that, and I'm speaking from a different lens, not as a legislator. I don't think my legislative work prepares me for that answer outside of providing some type of policy which can and cannot be useful depending on the audience. I'm speaking from my perspective as a mom of children who are in this community, as a social service worker, as an educator, and as someone who's a certified grief counselor and HIV counselor. People are struggling daily. And so we have to do a better job at seeing people, regardless of what your role is in this life, regardless of your role in their lives. Just wake up trying to be the best version of yourself, because you just have no idea how impactful that can be. So I'm going to remove the parameters around particular groups of people in particular neighborhoods, and I'm just going to say, just make it a practice, a common practice, to just have a human approach to uplifting everyone, because you have no idea how hard it can be for some people.
That's beautiful.
Well, they listen to you, Senator.
They cheered around. And as you're saying that, I feel that, 2 years ago with COVID, right, 4 years ago with COVID, and now what we're coming out of, a lot of that stuff was internalized inside, and that people did not have the opportunity to go outside because they were told to go outside, and then, they were told to wear a mask, you were told to do this, they were told to do that, and people are now trying to figure out what is the way, what is the right, whatever. Now we're all politicians. I'm telling you to vote for me. I'm telling you to vote for the top. You're being inundated with emails and everything. Everything is just overloaded with so much. So people just really sometimes don't know what's right and what's wrong and what's really real or what's social media. So you may think they're going through a mental health crisis, but they just overloaded. So I think some of us don't even know how to diagnose. I am not that expert. At that time, I tried to get better with not dropping F-bombs at my colleagues on the other side, but some days it slips. Sorry, whatever, I'm human. That's not saying Brett Parker is mental. That's saying I'm dealing with crazy people who are doing some antics, and they're getting on my nerves, and I wanted to punch them, but sometimes my bylaws or whatever, you can't do that. So you have all of these rules now that I have this title of what I can and can't do, and I'm still human. I'm still a wife. I'm still a bonus mother. I'm still trying to figure out all of these things. And you have the responsibility of 65,000 individuals to be responsible who want daily attention. And then when you give it to them, the answer that they ask for, they're mad. So I think overall, as a people, we're still hurting. And it's still not in our culture comfortable to say that we need help. Whether it's a doctor, whether it's a shrink, whether anybody in this world, we still have not figured out how to say we need help in any realm before. And what ends up happening in our community, the help comes when it's the last resort, because it's too late. That if you had opened your mouth, I say closed mouths don't get fed. If we just said it in a way beginning, then we'd be okay. I find a lot of people give their other character on social media, and then after that character comes out and I get a chance to know them, they're not who they really appear to be, and then that's how I can help them. So and that's the part that for me I'm kind of frustrated. People that know you will be like, "Oh, Rep Parker, why don't you just meet me at the restaurant?" They put on Facebook, but you got my cell number. Why don't you just say, let's go meet at the restaurant? And I think if people stop being so quick to do that and post and just doing what Rep Young said, humanize, saying hello, goodbye, good evening. I know we can't because we don't know if we want to get sick. Go back to the elbows and the fist bumps and just do that type of communal stuff.
Off a little bit. I think, Rep Parker, what you said really resonates with me around not being able to ask for help and what are the challenges. And, I'm a social worker by training and recognize that a big part of our challenge for asking for help is this epidemic of loneliness that we're in, that many of our kids are in, and there's just a level of isolation that obviously really kicked off during the pandemic, but it's just, I think, gotten worse, and we entrench ourselves in our devices, and in the city we just don't have the same kinds of communal spaces where people are there to be in community with you outside of school, right? What does that look like? And for our families too. And I think one of the biggest mental health impacts of violence is this feeling like it's just me. I'm alone. I'm the only one experiencing this. And one of the ways I think we as a city should be combating that is by making sure that our communal spaces, our rec centers, our parks, our pools, places like we're in right now are fully funded, equipped to just like bring people in and be the kind of casual hangout space that our kids want. Like, we need to be providing them like the games they want to play, the tech they're interested in, the kinds of like sports and activities that excite them. We're like really not meeting their needs, so they don't really want to be in the communal spaces that we currently have. And so if we recreate those spaces, we can actually use those as almost like a sneaky delivery mechanism for mental health care, right? Like, if you're already in community, you're having these weekly dinners with your friends and your peers and the people in your rec centers, it's so much easier to receive advice and support from social workers or licensed professional counselors or whoever is embedded in that space. And that's something that I think is doable, but also obviously we have these funding limitations. So I think the point is also well taken. Like, how do we do this kind of grassroots work, this kind of mutual aid support of each other, even when the funding isn't there? How do we, in the kind of government and elected official space, encourage that kind of community in a way that's really supportive of folks? And it can't just be one-off events, right? It has to be, I know to expect this place is going to be open every week at this time, and that's where I'm going to be to see my people. And that makes, I think, such a huge difference for folks.
I want to just make a quick comment and embarrass Regina by saying there is no one that I know in my colleagues in the House, and Rep. Parker, you're kind of close, but Rep. Young always makes sure that you're doing okay. She's one of those folks who, you know, when she says, "How you doing?" she actually means it. And you do pay attention intentionally to the mental health for yourself and for others around you. And you're a great example, and I strive to follow that example. But that's something that we do need. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. But that's something that we again need to be intentional about. The idea. I have a family member who struggles with mental health and has been the victim of gun violence in large part because of how difficult it is and the stigma that occurs in the layers, and especially with children, for the layers within a family, for the multi-generational impact, the cross-generational impact between siblings and cousins. When you have those struggles and the ways in which you see someone going through it and then feeling constrained because of stigma to not offer that help or to not ask for it when you need it. And so that's really when you talked about people struggling with mental health and mental illness being the victims, that's really true. We held a town hall about a year and a half ago that focused on this connection between disability and gun violence, and recognizing, where most people would say, "Oh yeah, of course, somebody gets shot, they're going to be physically disabled," but there's also the mental health aspects for the shooters. So many of them already come into their shooting incidents having been victims before. And so many of the folks that we have incarcerated also have different levels of disability. I think in one space I saw, and I'd have to go back and check the stats on it, but over 40% of our incarcerated individuals in Pennsylvania have at some point in time in their career in education been identified as someone with either a learning disability or some sort of special need. And so how we handle someone who has mental health or mental illness challenges, and how we give that person access. It's absolutely essential, because the isolation that then comes, and we see this, throughout, gun violence incidents. It is almost always those folks who are isolated, who are on one end of the gun or the other.
I have a mic in my hand and I don't want to go bang, bang, bang.
If you're Philadelphia,
Yep.
then we're loud, so go ahead, don't worry.
No, thank you very much, sir. So one of the things that I think is important to distinguish is a mental illness, which is an actual diagnosable disease, right, versus mental health. And Representative Young really touched into that, because most of us are experiencing, especially during these times, some level of mental health concerns, right? It doesn't hinder our ability to work every day, but you may notice that you're a little bit more heightened. That, why is my shoulder all the way up to my ear sometimes? I need to drop it a little bit. Or I'm driving and I'm looking like a little tense. Why am I holding my wheel a little tighter than usual? We're in a heightened state. And when you're in that heightened state, it places you at risk for acting outside of yourself. So some of the things that came up from the answers that I heard is the importance of maybe first and foremost starting with yourself. Checking in with yourself. What is it that I might need to do? And then expanding outward to how can I help one other person, my child, my family member, my community, my neighborhood, and being intentional about spreading that out. That is not just about what's happening out there with them, but also what's happening with me, right? So I really appreciate the different perspectives that came out of that particular answer as well. Next question. In recent years, we've noticed that the rates of suicide have increased, particularly with our younger children. Can you think of any resources that exist in Philadelphia County to address this? Take it away, take it away.
On the city side?
And so just for the sake of, this is an important question, but I just wanted, we do end at 12. So for the sake of time, I would just say, let's be concise. Thank you.
Yeah, quick on this one. I think I just heard it already. The 988 crisis line, which is national, but also you get that anywhere, based in Philly too. And that's for both if you are experiencing a crisis, but also if you have a family member who is in crisis and you want support on how to help them through that. The other one I want to call out is specific to the school district, and it's called Kooth, I believe, with a K, and it is like an online-based platform available to all district parents and students, and big shout out to the General Assembly here in PA for giving that funding to make that happen.
Thank you so much. Any other thoughts? Next question. What I do want to add, and not to, the 988 line needs some help. I would let you know that. As a board member for Suicide Prevention Alliance, we have, that is a resource that you can look up, and there are tons of resources there. We have individuals that train, and will go into the communities and train providers and non-providers about what to expect and how to navigate suicide. The reason why I mentioned 988 is because we did a little experiment where we called and kind of tried to get resources, to be quite frank, and it wasn't as effective. I won't go into too much detail about that, but sometimes you're better off dialing 911. 911 is still an option as well, okay? So I'll just put it there. You do have NIMH. You can look on their website. They have a whole bunch of different resources. As I mentioned before, Suicide Prevention Alliance, a lot of websites, lots of resources that's particular to different counties throughout the state of Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Moment, bro. I started off with saying we have this shortage. And I heard my counterpart, Representative Parker, talking about, I'm not your parents' age, I'm a generation behind that, but I am older. But that being said, the jewels of some of these issues lie in the history that we don't remember. We've had teacher shortages in this country before. We've had engineer What the government does is give access to degrees. And we have not done that. Special privileges through tax credit or scholarship money or reduced cost on interest, those are all viable options because we are at a critical, we're past the tipping point. Like catching up to do this work is not, you can't shortcut to get there, right? But we have to acknowledge it and do something as a nation. One thing I do want to return to real quick is I heard my friend mention loneliness, which is a factor, but I want to suggest there's something that, I, as an older person here, have to acknowledge that our family structure is broken, but we still are raised in secrecy. And loneliness is a factor, but that's a symptom of you're told to keep all your bad business at home. So women who get married in an abusive situation, people are like, well, why would they do that? They don't want to tell anybody, right? When children are abused, they don't want to tell anybody. You know here, when you get dealing with children, it takes a long time for them to begin to trust. And so we have not redesigned our systems. Schools, law enforcement, social programs, going to the Y is great, going to the pool is great, but you sit in Southwest Philadelphia, one of the largest immigrant populations in the city of Philadelphia from Africa is here. They don't go to the pool. Okay? They barely go to the recreation center. They don't trust government. When we have this next election, as critical as it is, more than half of the city will not vote because we have so many people from different places who don't trust government and they don't interact. So we have to redesign how, if we're going to do something about these things, how do we do it in a way that's realistic with them? So we have to intervene in their places of faith, in their places that they interact with. So we have to be, we're not really paying attention. We have the best of intentions, but we're not paying attention about the consequences. We do a lot of conversation about evidence-based. On a scale of 1 to 10, we are like 3. So my hope is that we will start to understand that whether you're younger or older, our households are not necessarily constructed like they were in the past, but this wrapping around, not sharing information, is always embedded in interacting. And unfortunately, today you need more information, not less, to help somebody who's going through some challenges.
That noise that was coming on. Whatever. So just 2 things really quick. One, thank you for all the kind words, but I can 100% be a complete train wreck at times too, right? I'm not always this peaceable person, so I work hard at the peaceable person. Yes, so I'll just start there. I can be a whole train wreck. So I will also say to your question, the piece that is oftentimes missing in those conversations are the actual people, the actual parents, the actual grandparents, the actual cousins. We don't need titles to be effective. I cannot stress enough the importance of making sure everybody knows, regardless of where you are in this space, regardless of your socioeconomic background, your educational background, you too can be activated in a conversation and helping someone. We have to stop putting all of the pressures, and I get it, there's a great responsibility in government, but when has government ever actually came to your rescue first? It's the people. So the more we start waking up the minds of the people and letting them know their strength, their worth, what they bring to the conversation, I think that's when we can really start changing those narratives.
And to piggyback on what she says, because I always, have these threads that I'm in, right? And I'll go back to say, hey, have you received a newsletter from Rep. Parker? Have you gotten an email? Have you been to the office? So literally when people say that there's things that are out there, our offices has everything that they possibly need. Now, whether you want to do it from your home or guess what? I challenge some people, hey, when's the last time you've been in my office? Oh, we can't get there? Sure. When do you want me to come to your block? So literally what we've been doing is going to people's blocks and making it a fun event. So they don't look at me being the government as the bad guy. I say the government is the people, to what Rep. Young says. So let's make it a fun thing. If you want to jam, you want to have parties or whatever, let's come. But I'm partnering with my council people and I'm partnering with the federal government so we can make things more accessible for individuals who can't get to the offices during the weekend. We're closed and we're doing events during the weekend. So we're making it more accessible for individuals. Now, as we're making everything accessible, you still gotta go to it. I mean, I'm definitely gonna make sure you vote. Hello. So you gotta do a lot of other things. I mean, and that's also when people, think we're gonna dance around eggshells. Nah, because guess what? We're able to look at certain parts of our district and we know where people are voting and where people are not voting. The folks that are voting the least are the folks that ask me for the most help. I say it again. The folks who are voting the least are asking for the most help. They are the ones that call me every day. They text me, they tweet me, they do everything on wrong. But I'm looking at the voting record. The ones who vote, good Lord. I mean, they'll ask me to come to a block party. They'll ask me, can you get the street light on? I mean, real vague things, not anything major. And that's the part that we're saying it's about the people. One of the things that I've taken another page out of Rep. Young's book is doing the civics. In my latest newsletter, I pretty much broke it down. There are 3 branches of government. We are in a legislative time. The legislator, your lawmakers are running now, and that's when you need to make sure you put your money and you really put your time and vote. You could do it in the comforts of your home. You ain't got to take a shower, brush your teeth. You could do it in your pajamas. Just get the crust out of your house because I need you to see my name. So I got to make sure that, when we're talking about those resources, that as long as we can get that woman who has the gavel back, we can help the woman at the top. I'll be quiet. Amen.
It asked about what types of programs are out there, right? So one of the things I want to call out for people when you're thinking about therapy is recognize therapy comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes, and when you talked about suicide, I thought about a young man that I went to his birthday party for the first time when he was 12 or 13. And he was 3 years out. He had tried when he was 9. He had attempted suicide, and then his mother also said, I also had problems myself, and I'm a suicide survivor as well. And this was a family that then decided this is how we're going to handle therapy. And one of the things that they dove into was art. So the young man was basically saying, every birthday I'm gonna have an art show, and this is what I'm going to do, and show in his connection. But it was also connecting him and his mother, and his family and his community, and the idea that there's so many ways that we can utilize therapy, and in the not in the lie on the couch and just spill your guts kind of mode, although that works for some folks, and I think we have to make sure that therapy is accessible in so many different ways, and that you can make sure that it is done in a way that allows the person to then grow and move. It's not about just identifying what the problems are and then staying put and wallowing in the muck of your past trauma. It's about how do we then move and create new beautiful things. And I've got a couple of pieces of art from that young man on my office walls if anybody ever wants to come and take a look.
Insurance. So when we say therapy, how are individuals that really direly need therapy can afford it? So I always walk into rooms and I never assume everybody in the room has insurance. So for me and what we're doing in our partnerships is making sure that those therapists come into neighborhoods that individuals don't have insurance, because and that's another conversation for another time, because we've been hearing from the providers on why they are hurting, especially black providers, because when they put the services out, how long it takes for them to be paid and reimbursed. That's another panel discussion, and we can partner with you from the state, because that is something, a deep dive that we really need to talk about as well.
At Temple for many years, for 10 years, doing a pilot program with individuals with schizophrenia and other schizophrenia disorders, right? And I went in as, okay, here you are, you're the lead psychologist, you're gonna put this program together, X, Y, and Z. So the understanding was that I was just gonna come in and I'm doing therapy as we know it. And I'm someone who, if you can't tell, I like hair, makeup, nails, all those things, right? So guess what? The individuals that they had the hardest times with, what was I doing? Doing their nails, doing their hair, helping them brush their teeth. And they're like, you a doctor, you're not supposed to do that. And guess what? I got a whole lot more from individuals during their time than I did when they were sitting on the couch. So it doesn't always have to be so formalized that we can sprinkle or be intentional about putting therapeutic interventions in different forms in a way that everybody can reach another person. So thank you so much for that. Now, I don't know how much more time. I feel like the last question is an important one because it's specific to child guidance and other organizations. And I would be being a board member, I'd be doing us a disadvantage if I didn't ask this question. So please, if you could allow me to, yes, and if we all could, 30 to 60 seconds max on your answer. Child Guidance Resource Centers has been advocating at a state level for a long time. Sure. Instead of increase